to let people in. Good afternoon, guys. A very big welcome to everyone joining for our 5th webinar now in our Level Up series. So that has gone so quickly. We seem to have flown through these over the last couple of weeks, and we're already at the penultimate one and with a big one for our final in a couple of weeks' time. So for anyone who doesn't know me or is maybe new to Fabric or our webinar series, I am Lisa. I'm founder of Fabric Academy and marketing and comms agency Unwritten Group. I started building Fabric almost 2 years ago now, and with the sole purpose to help empower marketers to thrive. And when I started out in marketing, the only support or training that was available at the time was an academic style of training. So it was uni or it was CIM essentially. And that just wasn't really for me. I was too impatient and wanted to get going in my career. So I essentially threw myself into learning on the job. So not always the best way, I know by sure now, but in the early days of my career, it was absolutely chaos. It was learning as I went. It was definitely a bit hit and miss. Sometimes it was total guesswork, but I quickly learned that didn't always work. I learned what did work and I learned what didn't. And I started to refine those practices and developed some of the very best marketing practices and techniques that I think we practice now in our agency at Unwritten today. So the idea about creating Fabric was to offer this type of training to marketers. So anybody like me who was impatient, or shall we say maybe ambitious and raring to go, could learn everything that they needed to know about marketing in just 12 weeks instead of the 20 years that it's taken me. And this series of webinars has been so crucial to that extra support. I'm personally obsessed with continuous learning. And so to be able to spend time picking the brains and sharing tips of some of the very best people in the business has been so valuable, hopefully not only to me, but also to you guys too, who have been on this webinar journey with us. And obviously that's what today is all about. So this is a big topic today. I'm sure one that we're all super passionate about. And it's all about changing the narrative around marketing. Now, over the last period, there's been some staggering research that's been done by the CIM that suggests that 1/3 of marketers still struggle to explain their role and to really get people to understand what they do. And a whopping 46% of marketers believe that businesses don't understand the positive impact that marketing has in their journey, their growth, their survival in some cases. And I'm sure any of you who are currently practicing marketing today will have come up against that at some point as well in your career. So our guest today is super passionate about starting to see some of these changes and these stats made to make a really positive impact on marketing as we go forward as an industry as a whole. So Charlie is the former chair of the CIM Northeast and has been a senior marketer for over 20 years, not to age you there at all, to Charlie, but his 11 years working as a strategic marketer for the Chamber of Commerce and 6 years as chair for the CIM highlighted to him just how misunderstood and undervalued marketing can be and how important it is that we all start to work together now to really change this. Last year, Charlie founded This Is Marketing. So this is a campaign driven to start to ensure that marketing is recognized and valued as a professional discipline, and to organizations that they need to invest in marketing properly and wholeheartedly to really drive their own growth and also the economy's growth as well. Charlie and I are working together on this project, so we're going to chat as much as we possibly can to you guys over the next 30 minutes, and then we're going to open the floor to you to ask any questions. So keep them coming throughout the webinar. The Q&A is open and we'll keep an eye on that, and I'll jump into those questions at the very end. So just before we get stuck into the questions today, I'm going to hand over to Charlie, and a big welcome to you, Charlie. I know this is a really important topic to you, so thank you for being here today. Before we get stuck into this, would you just give us a little kind of rundown of your journey? Tell us a little bit about your story and your experience of marketing over the last 20 years.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and thanks for inviting me, and nice to see you all on the call. I think there's quite a few people on the call that have been involved in the campaign, so some of this may be things you've already heard, but just from the point of view of my story, yeah, I fell into marketing at an early age, around about the age of 20. Where I couldn't decide what courses to do, did a H&D in business and finance, then did a marketing degree because I seemed to enjoy the marketing bit of that. Then went on to do a marketing and comms masters, and just really enjoyed that. And then suddenly found myself a marketing job, and then a marketing manager job. And then before I knew it, I've spent what feels like, well, it's probably now 30 years coming up, but 25 years falling into marketing jobs, which is just absolutely ridiculous. And I've spent my whole life really wondering if I should have been a marketer, or should I have been a plasterer, or should I have been an electrician, which I just think is absolutely ridiculous. And then I've obviously done bits and bobs for the Chartered Institute of Marketing, spoken to a lot more marketers, and found a lot of people have fallen into marketing, some of whom have done degrees in history and other things, and other CIM courses and qualifications along the way. But there just seems to be a swell of us that have fallen into this thing, and then a whole load of employers that don't understand it. So my experiences in the chamber for 11 years, I came across an absolute ton of different businesses, thousands of different businesses that you're talking to, that you're visiting, and no one can really grasp exactly what it is. And so there lies the problem. We've got a community that struggles to explain it, and we've got employers that struggle to understand it. And I don't like being in a profession that's not recognised and valued, because it's really important to me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think, that resonates with so many of us. I accidentally fell into marketing as well. And, lots of the most senior, the most influential marketers that, we see speak today right across the globe have a similar sort of story. And I think struggle in the same way that we all have a bit of a different opinion or perception of what marketing is. And those who live and breathe it and spend every day practicing it obviously see that, the immense value that it has to a business and how imperative it is to that business's growth. But if you're not in marketing, there's still this kind of perception that it's, lovely pictures or beautiful design or fluffy words, or, it still can be very undervalued in that way. And I think, our mission, hopefully together and with a team behind us, is to try and change that and to really make sure that marketing is seen and recognized for exactly what it is, that core business function.
Yeah, it's very much a mission to marketing, which the irony is bananas, isn't it, that marketing is struggling to market itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to change that, right? That's our mission now from now on. So the past year has really highlighted to us that so many businesses, as we know, still see marketing as a nice to have, and particularly running a marketing agency. This was so true for us because we saw, lots of clients who we did really value marketing, had invested heavily in marketing for years, it stopped overnight. And it was one of the very first things to cut when businesses were, battening down the hatches. Why do you think this is? What is it about marketing that people make it feel like it's a nice to have rather than a core business function?
Well, I don't think we help ourselves. That's the problem, where we're not really clear about explaining why you should be doing marketing. And I do think I look at parallels like engineering, for example, where people struggle to understand engineering. And so there's been a massive focus on communicating engineering to help people understand it, to attract new talent, to replace all the retiring engineers. But engineers have always been considered a profession. I'm never going to start trying to be an engineer at all without any qualifications. But yet, the access to become a marketer at some level by opening up a Twitter account and starting to do social media activity for someone, or starting to do a bit of telephone sales even for someone, is easy access, isn't it? So that doesn't help the situation too. So I don't think we're clear on what marketing is. I don't think we're good as a community about explaining the actual benefits and the return on investment and talking the business language as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is very much the case. And I guess, there has never been a script for this, has there? There's never been a set way for this to be described. Even, universities, grads coming out of universities don't necessarily have the tools in order to be able to explain the value or to demonstrate the value. And I guess that's something that, we hopefully can change over a period of time. But I think that would definitely help, a common voice about, what marketing is and the value it can bring to start to change those incorrect perceptions about fluffy stuff, nice stuff, pretty stuff,
I think as well, I mean, I've just moved into the logistics sector. I came out of the chamber. When I first came into the chamber, I thought I'll be here for a couple of years, get the gist of it, and then move on to another role. But actually, I got a real interest in heavy industry and engineering and logistics and that side of things. And actually, moving into the logistics sector seemed like a sideways move in order to get me the experience in a sector that I needed to get into chemicals or manufacturing. But I honestly thought when I moved into the logistics sector, what is there to logistics? Move something from A to B, how hard can it be? But there's some interesting complexities in that I've really tried to understand and build my own personal knowledge about the sector in. But what I find interesting is the combined authorities, these Valley combined authorities, and the local authorities and the government are now starting to talk about the logistics sector as an enabler to help other sectors. And so should we be seeing marketing as an enabler? Without basic marketing, your business is going to die. But with proper professional strategic marketing, actually, it could be a real enabler for businesses in the same way logistics can be. You can't get your product to a customer without using logistics. So should we be thinking about things like that too?
Yeah, and that's actually a really interesting perspective and I guess analogy in terms of thinking that, I mean, we often talk about this, for me, a business can do so much without marketing, and word of mouth is great, reputation is great, personal networks are great, of course. But if you really are ambitious and want your business to grow, you have to have marketing sitting at the core of that. It has to be something that you invest in heavily, that you stick to continuously. You can't dot in and out. And, like with, an accountancy firm or a legal firm, it has to be something that you're in for the long term. It doesn't just yield results overnight, which I think is also a common misconception, but it does yield results, and really, really good results if it's done properly and if it's done correctly. So I guess it's getting that message out in the right way on a mass scale.
Yeah. And at the moment, we're not doing that because we're all defining marketing in totally different ways. And if we're all honest, we're delivering marketing to totally different standards. So businesses don't know what they're buying either.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's, a governing body in terms of standards for results, for measurement, for impact would be really useful for that. How do you think we as marketers could work better together to address this, to show that marketing can be a core business function?
Yeah, well, I think that's the starting point, that we should be working together as a community because it's in all of our best interests to make sure that we're better recognised, to attract new talent into the industry, to get the budgets we need to be able to help our businesses move forward. But the starting point has got to be that we all describe it in the same way. If this was a brand, it's got an identity crisis at the moment. We need to get that clear identity right so that people understand what it is that we all do. And that's really where the This Is Marketing project started to identify the issue. I did a bit of research to test that CIM survey. And in fact, I found the results more worrying. CIM say a third, but the community that I was talking to, you were talking about more like half didn't find it easy to explain marketing. What was interesting about that is those that worked in micro businesses found it easier. Those marketers that weren't qualified in marketing found it easier. So the more qualified we become, the more difficult we find to explain it. But if we had this kind of common language and common view of what marketing was, and maybe I don't do all of those bits of marketing, maybe I just do one element of that, but then at least I can explain that to an employer, and they can then look at bringing other marketers in for other elements, or agencies in to support in other areas. So we need to get that right first of all. But that's not about me saying what it is. That's about us all agreeing what it is and getting that common buy-in and that common voice. and then us working together to start communicating that consistently and clearly, and using the right language to explain it as well.
Yeah, and I think, we found that from what we got back from the survey results when we were looking at this, that actually people do want this toolkit type approach, that they weren't finding their way with it, in its own right, and that because of that was causing confusion, or certainly the more junior marketers were struggling when it's board level to try and have that conversation, to bring marketing, a seat to the board table, as we talk about all so often, and having a toolkit, something that they can get from the marketing kind of industry leader, would be really useful to them to be able to help start those conversations, at least within those businesses.
Yeah, and I think once we've described what it is clearly, and we all understand it, and we all understand where we fit into it, the next job is then to communicate that to our target, well, to the employers. And actually, we need to think about this as a marketing exercise. We need to think, who are we marketing to? So I am marketing to my MD, and I'm marketing to my FD as well. What are their barriers to and objections to that? What are their personas? Should we be thinking about them as buyers and buyer personas? And I do think I said it there earlier, we don't talk in a financial enough language. My FD needs everything black and white, logical, financial. He's not bothered about the pretty pictures and that. He's bothered about a return on investment. And it might surprise you when we've done that piece of research and we've asked people to give the kind of definition of what they think marketing is. Only 3% referred to marketing have even used the word objectives or goals in any kind of definition or any kind of categories or language that was used there. Only 3% of us, so 97% of us, aren't making that link between what we do and how it actually works to support the business goals or objectives.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised at that at all, actually, because the program, as Fabric's been running for some time, the very first lesson we start with in that program is how to teach marketers to gain the business objectives from the senior team. So how do they have that conversation? How do they understand what the business objectives are and what they're working towards, and how do they benchmark where they are now? And it's really interesting, the feedback that we get from that particular lesson, that lots of marketers question why is this part of my role? Why, if I'm a marketing manager, what does it matter what the business objectives are? And again, this just highlights I guess what has been a disjoint between business growth, business ambition, business growth and bottom line and results and impact, and financial, I guess, to where marketing is linked. And this is why we start with that lesson as a very first starting point. As a marketer, it's almost impossible to start and plan a strategy and make that impact and show a return if you don't know what we're working towards as a business. So yeah, I'm not surprised to hear those stats, but I guess what's really encouraging is that people are calling out for this type of knowledge. They want to know how to do this. They know the importance of it. And they know that if they can get buy-in at that senior team at the very outset, and if they're working towards those business objectives, it does make their job much easier, but also shows the impact on a much bigger scale.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that is so great and refreshing to see is all the people that we've engaged with, and we've had over 600 people that have been involved in the survey that we did here for the business marketing campaign. It just feels like every single one of those 600 people is absolutely passionate about marketing and recognises the issue. So it feels like that's a perfect bed for us to be able to work from, to come up with something and all work and buy into that and get behind it. So yeah, I think there's two parts just to sort of conclude on your question. One, getting that consistent message of what marketing is, and then two, how do we then start selling that into our businesses and persuading our businesses of that? And I think that's about being clear as to what those objections are, thinking about the personas of the individuals, and befriending the financial director as well, really looking at them as a target to get on side.
Yeah, absolutely. What advice would you give to those who are looking to secure investment within their business for marketing, or who are looking to get buy-in from their senior team so that they really do value marketing and then agree to that investment?
Yeah, well, I think that I've said it a bit there, really, haven't I? It's picking off those individuals. And we're good at this as marketers. We understand about identifying the target market and segmenting everyone and identifying who you're going to go for and how to position those messages. So it really is about that, but it's also about going through that complete strategic marketing process of that initial, whatever you want to call it, diagnosis, analysis, that first step of doing the research and understanding that, getting the data, getting the insight, then putting that together into a plan, and then reporting against that plan. And I'm mindful that that not every one of us is doing that entire process. There's a lot of people that are just in the comms section of that, and maybe don't have the budgets to do that, aren't involved in that bit. There's a lot of people that are just in the digital space. I mean, I was thinking about a telesales person. If we as marketers claim sales as part of the marketing process, which I would describe it as, then a telemarketer is doing marketing, not the full marketing process. But also flip it the other way, and there's people that do marketing that don't touch comms at all. They're doing the research side of it and the insight side of it. So yeah, it's about getting that clear plan and reporting against that plan as well, so people can see the return that you're achieving.
Yeah, and that's really interesting in terms of, I guess we've talked the importance of objectives, but how important do you think it is for marketers to evidence the impact? And, is this the way that we change perceptions from a nice to have? Is it as simple as that, if we could get every marketer across the board, measuring and, showing the impact, would that do the job, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why we should think we shouldn't have to show the impact. And the fact is, it's becoming easier to show the impact. So again, just to look at another sort of parallel, I work for AV Dawson. We own Port of Middlesbrough, in Middlesbrough, port facility here. And we are looking at massive £1 million investments to build a bigger quayside to take larger ships. We don't just go and spend £3.5 million on a quayside without justifying that return on that investment. So why do we think spending £1 million on a marketing campaign should be any different?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, if we go back 20 years ago, maybe longer, before you and I even started out in this, marketing was classed as doing stuff. So very often the end result, the output would be, a brochure or a website or a set of business cards, or, and I think it's that from those kind of previous years where the output was measured by the thing that was produced. But you're so right. I mean, more so now than ever before, we can measure every single tiny tactic that marketing, touches and should be doing that. And not only to show the impact, which obviously is, hugely fundamental to the whole process, but also it gives marketers that insight on what works, what doesn't work, what their customers are reacting to, what their marketplace is talking about. The knowledge and the insight that you get in order to make those informed and strategic decisions going forward is so valuable. And it's funny because people are sometimes a little bit terrified about the analyzing data piece in marketing. And for years, people used to say to me, that's a very specialist skill. It's not part of my remit. And we do a lesson specifically on analyzing data, because every good marketer should know how to analyze data. And that it's not, it doesn't need to be rocket science. It's not, it's not like code or anything like that. It's just understanding the numbers and then understanding what to do with those numbers. What information do they tell you and how to move forward to improve them? So yeah, I think it's, for me, the evidence has always been a huge part of marketing, but I think more so than ever before, this is how we really show impact. This is what your MD personas and your FD personas are looking for. They're not bothered about what you're doing to a degree. They're bothered about how it's performing and what difference it's making to them as a business, right?
Yeah, and I think sometimes, yes, the tools and the way that you can measure those tools are greater than they've ever been before. But as marketers, there's bigger points, isn't there, about brand and sentiment of the brand, which goes wider than social sentiment and things like that. Yeah. So it can be a challenge to measure things more widely. But we've just got so many ways of doing it now, and so we need to look at doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because you and I have set some clear objectives for This Is Marketing, but what are your hopes personally around this initiative, and how do you think it can change the marketing industry for good? And I guess there's going to be short-term things that we can achieve, and probably, some of it's going to be on a much longer term basis. But I mean, what are you hoping to see from this, Charlie?
I think there are a couple of things really. One of which is about profession and professionalism, and for this industry to finally be recognised as a professional industry in the same way as engineers and accountants are recognised. And I think about the standards as well, and Corgi standards of gas fitters and things like that, for it to be easier for people to understand the levels of competence of people within the industry, to make sure they get what they think they're getting when they buy it. But the other thing is, I just think I can't think of a more exciting industry that I could have accidentally fallen into. I mean, just every day is so different and so varied. And I've got quite a passion for helping young people find the next part of their career, because I really felt I got rubbish career advice when I was younger. So I kind of wonder how many people could actually be coming into this in a more conscious, considered way and enjoying a really fulfilling career.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that people end up in marketing by accident, and they take various different routes to get there, but actually some, real proper insight into what marketing entails and every aspect of it. And not that some people might want to do every aspect, but being able to see that really broad spectrum, and then people can choose whether they love the entire piece or whether they want to focus on creative or content or digital, or, they can really start to hone their skills there on one particular niche. But yeah, I mean, it is such a fulfilling career. And there is so many ways to get into marketing, but there's not a very clear channel in terms of how. And I guess we work with a lot of the local universities to help marketing grads secure that first role. And we talked a little bit about this a while back, but I guess that disjoint between coming out of university with an academic degree and what those in industry are looking from a grad role, and how the two vary so vastly, and how coming out of uni with that degree doesn't necessarily prepare you, or I could probably just say doesn't prepare you at all for going into a marketing role. And I guess this is hopefully where we're trying to bridge the gap with Fabric. But there is a huge job to do for us as a country, to help grads coming out who have a keen interest in marketing, but suddenly get the shock of their life when they fall into a first role, of how actually vast and varied and fast paced it can be. Any advice to any grads that we might have on here about that transition?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're honest, it's the case for all all degrees that people get. You come out and the real world is quite different, and there's a bit of time that it takes to bed in and understand whatever it is you've chosen to follow as a career. I think though, with marketing, you can quickly get to be in quite a responsible position and in the front line. I've got a marketing manager in my team, and we're building a team here, and he's got that autonomy and responsibility to look at what that voice is of the business and to manage that every day. With that comes great responsibility, doesn't it? Because if you get that wrong, then everybody sees that. So I think yeah, I mean, it's an exciting career opportunity for anyone to follow, really.
Yeah. And just to finish off, I guess, on our questions side. So if anybody's got any questions, start popping them in the Q&A now. We'll start working through them. But any tips on how marketers can have just greater confidence in the value that they bring to businesses across the board? Anything that you instill in your team, or, you've learned through your journey, in terms of just making sure that you as a marketer know yourself, that value is so important, and then having confidence to, I guess, bring that to the senior team?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, actually, because it was something that I didn't mention earlier, that one of the things I would like is for us to feel less like this. We've got this imposter syndrome, which I feel less and less these days, but I think that's come with age. And it's something that I've got a 12 and 14-year-old, and you kind of wish you could tell them what you know now about not worrying so much about what everyone else thinks about you, and not being so self-critical. So I do think, God, if you could package that and give that to someone as they're coming out of university, as they're coming out of school and everything, just to just be more comfortable in yourself and with yourself. And if you don't know the answer to something, to feel comfortable to ask that question, and just to suck up as much as you can from the people that have got more experience from you, from books, from online blogs, and from everything, to build yourself as a marketer, and decide which bit of that you want to pick up and own it and get really good in it. rather than saying you're a strategic marketer that does everything if you're not a strategic marketer that does everything, because we're only actually damaging our own industry by doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting, the debate on imposter syndrome. We talk about this a lot now, but I guess hopefully part of what we're doing is, giving marketers that confidence, and what that shape takes, we don't really know yet. We don't know whether it's going to be a toolkit, or we've talked about an infographic, or we've talked about reports or brand narratives. We're not really sure what the output is going to be of that yet until we've done all the research. But I guess for me, probably coming into marketing, knowing exactly what it looks like and what it entails, because my perception was completely off what it really is when I fell into it. And I came from a creative path route, not from a strategic side at all. But also then once you're in it, having that basis, that foundation, that grounding, that, is the common voice and is that toolkit that you can use, I think would help build a confidence much quicker than those just happen to find their way. For me, when I set out, my confidence came from when I did something right, and then I realized that's good, but it was then knocked again when I tried something that didn't work. And at the time, I didn't know that was okay. I didn't know that was as important as the stuff that worked, because you learn just as much from that. And I guess it's that really open and honest kind of chats that we're having now, but also that, that toolkit, I'm calling it, but whatever we deliver, to have access to know how to find your way.
Yeah, well, I think that my interpretation of the data that I mentioned earlier about micro businesses feeling more capable of explaining marketing, those that don't have marketing qualifications feeling more capable, my interpretation of that is that those people maybe don't understand the full breadth and depth of it. And that's been supported by, when I've been sharing some of this feedback with others, they've said, the more qualifications I do, the more confused I become by it all, which isn't great, but it just demonstrates how broad and deep this is. So somehow we need clearly articulate what that marketing universe is, which we think will probably be infographic. There's lots more that we should be doing. There's a whole wider strategy around all of this, but we've got to get to that point to that common understanding that we all buy into. And I think that's kind of the next stages that we need to progress to, really. And a lot of what I'm doing today is, and in other conversations and discussions at the moment, is to build that kind of greater understanding, to sense check these things, to see what people are thinking about it, see if we're going off on a totally wrong angle or not, or if there really is a need for this and for us to grab hold of this. And sorry, just to finish off, I've spent I'm 44 now, I've spent the first 25 years of my life waiting for somebody else to do this. And I'm staggered that there isn't this all pulled together in one place, but I can't seem to find it anywhere. And I'm getting to that point in my life where I think, stuff it, just start doing it yourself and seeing if you could galvanize your own network to buy into this and help you do it with you together.
Yeah, I think that's so important, isn't it? Just allowing us to be able to open this up to the community and say, this has to be a common voice. It has to be us as a marketing community, as a marketing profession, that we lead this change together, and hopefully share that message wide and far together. Right, I'm going to start with some questions because we've got a good couple in now, and I'm going to start with a question from Adam. So thank you, Adam. I'm going to lead with you. So Adam says, the main difference to engineering is the need to be accredited to be able to work due to the safety imperatives. So is this something that marketing should consider to hardwire CPD? And if so, would marketing be inclined to do this, do we think?
Yeah, it's a good question, Adam, and it's something that probably CIM has been batting around behind closed doors for some time. How could we make that happen? They've not found a solution to that yet, but you might have noticed that CIM has become much more proactive in starting to push its chartered marketer shields out there of chartered marketers and trying to create that flip out there of saying there's this standard out there, and hopefully encouraging employers to start then demanding that of marketers, which then drives marketers to then want to achieve that standard.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We've got a quick question just come in from an anonymous attendee here, but it's so important. So for every experienced strategic professional marketer, there are at least 2 business owners, cousins, mates, who will claim to do the same job for less than half the cost. Will this continue to put pressure on buy-in and rates and the understanding of marketing? And until the marketing profession is properly regulated, I'm not sure we'll ever be held in the same regard as other properly regarded professionals. Love that question. I mean, it's so, it's so true, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think though, the way that you've got data and insight, and that's becoming stronger and stronger now. Often what you'll find is cousin Bob or whatever is just whacking out some posts on social media and hoping for the best. And so this goes back to using that full marketing process, thinking about things strategically, coming up with a plan and demonstrating that return on investment against that plan. And that should deliver a higher return on investment than someone that just chucks a load of tweets out there. If it's not, well, what are we doing? Are we actually analysing things properly?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's so tricky, but it's also so true of every industry. There's always somebody who could do, your painting better than, the professional painter, or, somebody who can, I guess it is true of every industry. It just so happens to feel a little bit more alive in marketing that, everybody thinks they can turn their hand at it. And I think part of the reason for that is because people love marketing, even if they're not skilled in it, or it's not their profession, or it's not their job role. Everybody loves to go to a marketing meet or a creative meet or a content meet. It's got a really different feel to go into a finance meet or a legal meet, and so you do find that there, and we find this particularly in the bigger businesses that we work with. Everybody wants to be involved. They want to have their say, and they can take a bit, and they want to own a bit. And, we try and be really strict with that, it doesn't work. You get too many cooks, definitely does spoil the broth on this occasion.
But let's look at finance and accountancy as a parallel. You can do some basic bookkeeping for a business, no problem. But would you dare to be an accountant doing the sort of the wider accountancy piece? Most accountants will actually deliver more value for their business and pay for themselves, twice over, whatever. So it's a decent strategic marketer should be an investment for the business that will deliver a return.
Yeah, and I think that's an absolute bang on answer to that question, in a sense that it's about knowing what value marketing should bring so that you can recruit the right people to bring that. So you're asking the right questions. Have they got the right capabilities? Are you showing them the right evidence, as opposed to letting the cheapest person or come in and do the job? So I think, you're bang on there with that. Okay, we've got a question from Tom here. Hi, Tom. So many in-house teams rely on external support in marketing. Do you think this can create a misconception that in-house teams don't always have the right competencies or levels of experience, even though they might just be bringing specialist service or the need for additional resources?
Yeah, hi Tom. All right. Yeah, I think it's about how we explain marketing. Marketing has become so broad with so many different channels. I mean, you asked me to start doing a TikTok campaign. I couldn't even begin to. I don't have a TikTok account, and I would bring in somebody that had some specialist expertise to do that. So yeah, I think we need to be honest with ourselves. Here's the marketing universe. Here are all the marketing channels that sit as part of the comms within that wider marketing universe. At the end of that process there, after you've done your strategy and after you've done your sort of analysis and everything, and this is the bit I do. I do this bit at this end, I don't do that bit at that end, or I do this bit at this level, I don't do this bit at this level. Whatever it is you do, and then explain quite clearly to your employer that actually I think we need to bring in some specialist expertise for this element. Again, to think of a parallel, you build a house. Does the guy that manages that project of building the house come in and do the electric wiring, the plastering, the painting? No, they bring in specialists for these things. We just need to be honest that that's how it works, the same way as a marketer.
Yeah. And to add to that, Tom, I guess what we've been finding, because as Fabric, we've been doing lots of discovery with this, with businesses who have in-house marketing teams and those who are quite substantial in size for in-house marketing teams. And what they're finding is the problem is not necessarily that there is different specialisms within the team. It's that there's no common process to following and building a strategy. So everybody's doing something a bit different and not necessarily working towards the same goals, or, person X doesn't know what person Y is doing and their messages are misaligned. And what we're working with businesses to do and try and really instill is this common process that every single person, no matter what their specialism, whether they be the strategic overseeing the whole thing or whether they just have a small part in that to play, that they do this training that we're offering to give everybody that same common process. And I think partially that's what's missing a little bit in there. I totally agree with Charlie that, it's fine to bring in specialists or additional resources or have people kind of pigeonholed in specific roles within in-house teams. I think that makes sense. But I think having everybody follow a common process, all working towards the same objective, the same business objective, with each individual common goals really, really helps with that.
Yeah. I think as well, even, and I think earlier on in my career, I'd have thought, oh God, my boss is going to wonder why I'm here if I'm bringing an agency in for this. But now at this point, I wouldn't think twice about bringing an agency in to support us with, a refresh of our strategy. We might write a strategy every 5 years and have a refresh of it once a year, whereas you've got agency people that are doing this every week for their clients. So you're going to have you're just going to be more specialist at doing that than I am. So we can learn from each other, bring in that extra support, even see it as development for me in my role to bring in that support on something that I might typically have done myself.
Yeah, completely. Okay, so we've got another question here. So is there an issue of how marketing teams are branded themselves? In a small business, there might be one or two people doing social media, brochures, website managers, whereas a marketing team in a larger organization is so much more multi-challenged, and actually has a strategic voice leading the business. And then we've got, don't get me started on teams being called the marketing girls. Well, yes, we know that, absolutely. But yeah, are we branding ourselves in the wrong way?
Yeah, well, I think there's some research that's been done at the moment about the amount of the number of marketing roles that are on boards in businesses, and that's an area that we've talked quite passionately about getting more marketers to be at the boardroom table in businesses and driving businesses forward. And I think the more we get businesses to understand that, the more that is going to happen. So yeah, it's about seeing where marketing is in the business, and the business at the moment, it's not always at that strategic table, but I think it should be.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Okay, question from Jazz here. So, hi, I'll be returning to my final year of uni in September, having now finished my placement year. Is there anything that you can recommend me doing to best prepare myself for a graduate job? I'm thinking of setting up a blog. Can you think of anything else besides online courses?
Well, you've just made me think there, Jazz, that when I came out of university, I tried to get a job doing a bit of web design, and I didn't get the job because at the time I didn't know Dreamweaver, and Dreamweaver was what everyone was starting to use, and I was really slick on a load of other things, really good at IT at the time, and I said I can learn that I can learn that quickly, and I didn't get the job. And I went home that day and had a look at Dreamweaver, and I actually learned it in an afternoon. And I was really cross because I would have got that job, and that would have probably set me away from my future career from that moment there. So I think the more you can get a good understanding of these different things, the more that will help you get through interviews. So I would keep on top of all the different social channels, because unfortunately, that's often that perception that people have for those first graduate jobs, that you're going to be managing the social media channels. And just as my example there, half a day of me getting that understanding to be able to talk confidently in that interview would have made the difference. So I would do what you're saying there. I would look at blogs. I would learn as much as you can through those things. I would get into the different marketing networks, the Marketing Meets network that's out there, get into all of those and start absorbing some of that marketing content, but also make sure I understand the whole range of marketing channels, not to pigeonhole you as someone that just does social media, but to help you get through that interview where the employer might think that's all that marketing is about. And then once you get in, to a business, it's then your job to sell marketing into that business. And again, just to give you an example from my career, I came into this job. In fact, when I came to AV Dawson, they were originally looking for a marketing assistant role. And I said, they came to me because of my contacts at the chamber. And I said, have you thought of marketing from more of a strategic way? They said, what do you mean? I explained what that was. They said, I'm interested in that. Who can I speak to? I said, me. I'm interested in coming to work for this business. And I've always tried to demonstrate how to make marketing a strategic tool in a business. And that has helped me progress my own career, because I've created that job for me to be the obvious person to walk into it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. And I think, Jazz, just to add to that, don't be afraid to reach out to people on LinkedIn. Employers who are, head of marketing in roles, or marketing directors, or agency leads, get in touch with them on LinkedIn and ask if you can have a quick chat with them. People are super kind with their time, and sometimes that feels a little bit scary. But if you can just pick their brains and say, what are the things that are important to you when interview, and what are you looking for in a potential, grad role? And, there has to be a good perception there, if it's a grad role, that you're not experienced, but, being able to understand what they're looking for. And 9 times out of 10, it's ambition, it's resilience, it's resourcefulness, it's all those other skills outside of your, your actual degree that employers are looking for. So, reach out to a couple of people, ask them if they'll, spend 10-15 minutes with you. And that's a great way to prepare yourself for going into interview, if you understand what employers are looking for as well.
Yeah, and make employers and their organisations feel special. I recognise how difficult it is to get that first job, and I recognise you'll be smashing CVs absolutely everywhere. But when you walk through that door to speak to that employer, explain why you've picked them out and they're important to you, and why you think you'd fit in with that business. And it can take 2 minutes to do some of that research online as to what a business is about and their values and what they're trying to achieve. And again, I've had graduates approach me for jobs, and the first thing I say is, what do you know about this business here? And they can't tell me enough. They haven't done enough research to understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just picking up on another question from Tom here, because it's relevant to this piece, but how important is volunteering for graduates, as well as knowing latest trends and tools?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it was something that I picked up in my career, probably quite late, maybe about 15 years ago, to start thinking, how do I take that next step in my career? And so I started volunteering on boards, and I would encourage more people to, as early on in their career, to get that experience of volunteering in any way. But if you can get a role on a board as well, it will give you a wider business experience as well as marketing experience. But actually, more widely, volunteering, whether it be coaching kids in a local club, whether it be in the Lifeboat Association, or anything in between, I think that's always helped me become a broader human being, and have more compassion for people, have a greater understanding of human beings, and make me hopefully seem more interesting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a question here from Joe, which says, how do you balance the shouting about how great we are and the fab things we're doing and the great results we're getting without coming across as showing off?
I would say you make other people feel that they are great. That's the approach I typically take. The easiest way to sell an idea into people is to make them feel like it's their idea. So there's a lot of work around that, where you might come up with a plan, and then in selling it into whoever you're selling it into, you make everyone feel like it's their plan. So when you're reporting back, you're making everyone feel like it's their success and it's team success. A lot of these things, one of the first things I say to people that come into the business that I work for is, it's in everyone's responsibility to protect the reputation of this business. So every time you go out there, how you look and how you present yourself is all impacting our reputation. So we share success and failure together, I would say.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting one, because people do worry that the marketing teams can be a bit showy and are always kind of shouting about the great things that they've done. And I think for me, this is always down to results again. If you keep it less about, look at this great campaign, or look at these lovely pictures, and you keep it about, we have increased this by this, and we've customer acquisitions have gone up by this. The marketing piece is fundamental to the entire success of the business. So if marketing does a great job, it rolls onto sales. And if sales do a great job, it rolls onto customer service. And if customer service do a great job, it rolls onto business growth and reinvestment and new staff. So, it should never be seen as a show off, in my opinion. It should be, look at the great work that we're doing to help sustain this business, to help grow this business. And, the entire business is part of that process. The marketing team should not be separated and should be out there doing it on their own. The business should have input. They should be feeding back. They should be talking about what their customers love and what they don't love and gaps in the market. And therefore, everybody's success is the marketing department's success as well.
Yeah, we shouldn't forget that you need a decent product and a decent service for people to come back and keep on buying. And we all talk about the value of repeat custom and loyal customers. So if you're trying to market a poor product, you're not going to get anywhere. So everyone's got to share in that glory together, haven't they? Or fame.
Absolutely. Shout proud and loud, Joe, I would say. Okay, question here from James. So he's asked, how do you feel about the CIM Marketing Competency Framework that links with the conversation of what is marketing? Is there any link between the two, or?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And it was something I looked at when I was starting to get my head around all of this. I think the CIM Competency Framework is a really good starting point for starting to see the different parts of marketing. But there's some bits missing if you kind of try and look at that as a process. So I think whatever we develop, if we're developing some kind of, this is the marketing universe, we need to have that consciousness of how that sits against the framework. But also, I don't think we should be penned in by that. And I think we need to challenge that framework if we look at it and think that doesn't quite link together properly. And there's maybe a slight evolution of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully that answers the question. For those that don't know what I'm talking about, this is a kind of a sort of pie chart of the parts of marketing and the different elements of it. So, brand and things like that, analysis, etc. It's a great starting point, and it's working well for making sure that people get onto the right CIM qualifications. But I don't feel it fully captures the marketing universe, and I don't think it fully shows things in a chronological order or separates things into parts that it potentially could. You look at some of the things that Mark Ritson's done, where you're dividing things into 3 or 4 core parts. You look at the elevator pitch. How could you explain this clearly to someone in a minute in an elevator? I think we need to get better at doing that.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Okay, I've got a question here from Lorraine. So, given the importance of an evidence-based approach to prove impact of marketing on the business, there are implications for the practical training of marketers. Is there an argument for having an essential qualification which anybody in a marketing role should work towards, regardless of their specialism, which demonstrates understanding of business planning, financials, etc., especially as everyone is aiming for commercial success for that business?
Yeah, the simple answer to that is yes, but I go back to the question that someone raised earlier of how on earth do you make those standards become compulsory? Ideally you need some way of being really clear. This is the standard that this is marketing, this is the universe, this is the bit I'll do, and this is the standard that I'll do it to. And we're some way off getting that to that point. But we need to create this kind of pull marketing factor of getting employers to demand it. And at the moment, they don't understand what they're buying, so they don't demand it.
Yeah, completely. And Lorraine, couldn't agree more with that point. Hence, for me, I did exactly what Charlie's doing with This Is Marketing. And because that type of qualification or that strategic kind of hands-on training wasn't out there, I just went ahead and built it because, again, I was kind of sick of waiting for that to be out there. And I guess, we're all trying to change this for the better, but we're all doing it a little bit independently at the moment. And I guess what we're trying to achieve, particularly with This Is Marketing, is how do we get this as a common standard right across the industry? And again, it's challenging the training that is out there. Is it up to date? Is it correct? Is it preparing people for industry roles? And is it going to make them really, really good practitioners in marketing? And part of the things that fall out of that curriculum are how to make a good informed decision, how to analyze data. There's things that fall out of that curriculum, which is there at the moment, which are essential to a marketer's, skill set, but just aren't being taught anywhere. So we're trying our best, aren't we, Charlie, to move this forward, but it's going to take effort, it's going to take time, it's going to take a whole bunch of us to try and do this. So anyone who wants to get on board would welcome their support, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to wrap up with one last question here. Just to say, if we haven't had a chance to answer your questions, because I know there is still a few floating around, please do feel free to reach out to me or Charlie on socials. We will absolutely answer your questions if we don't get them done in this webinar. But the last one for today. So not a question, but a top tip, this says, for new grads: learn and practice how to use the telephone. It may be new to grads, and these type of normal skills are what are taken as kind of common sense, but not always. Actually being able to pick up the phone, get comfortable with speaking to people is really important. And it's a core skill of a marketer, right? You've got to be able to verbally communicate as well as everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, as marketing has become more technical in the channels that are available and more analytical in the data that's out there, you do worry that you get more of a scientist and one of these people, like an IT person, that will sit in a dark room and do all the techie bit, and actually someone that's incapable of having a phone conversation with people. So we are starting to need people to have such a broad skill set. People used to think marketers all should be extroverts, but actually there's plenty of us floating around that are actually introverts, that listen a little bit more than talk, maybe, that think a little bit more than speak earlier. And sorry if I'm offending big extroverts out there, but we've all got those different skills and that we can bring to the table. So yeah, it's I do still think being able to communicate as a human being face to face with people is always going to be important. You still need to be able to sell an idea. You don't work in a box. You need to be able to work with other people.
Yeah, and that's probably really good advice for any of the grads out there. Those softer skills to work on are just as important as the real kind of role skills. And there are so many resources out there in order to help develop those, and webinars to watch this type of thing, but all sorts of different tools and tactics depending on how you learn best. To help with those. And my advice is always don't be afraid to ask for help. Just get stuck in there in terms of reaching out to somebody and asking them, and you'll be really surprised how willing people are to help. Well, we're going to wrap up there, Charlie. That's been amazing. Thank you so much for your time sharing.
Can I just quickly say, just to finish off, sorry, for my part, Lisa, that we're still trying to get further input from people, and so you will start to see some of these results seeping out. We will pull something together to give a proper summary of all of the results as well, because I know some of you have been keen to see what all the results look like. And so if you do see things creeping out on social channels, if you can add some support to it or challenge to it, just to keep that conversation going, that will be really useful and will really help inform the next part of the process of building this strategy and developing this infographic marketing universe, whatever it is that we decide is required.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to second that, the more of you that we have involved, the better. People can sign up to the newsletter right on the website, Charlie, so they can be kept informed of what's going on, what we're learning along the way, and they can shape that. And I guess it's these conversations that we need to keep having. So those of you who've been on the webinar today, we'd love to continue to hear your views, and we'll update you with how we're moving forward and what we're finding along the way. But don't be afraid to shout up and give us your input as we go.
Yeah, and so that website's thisismarketing.co.uk, and thanks also to everyone that's been involved up until now as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Charlie. It's been wonderful to just hear your views. Always very, very insightful and really useful, I'm sure, to everybody who's been on the webinar today. We will share this recording out to everybody. So if anybody needs to watch it back, you can do that at any point, and it will be up on the Fabric website for anybody to access from there. Otherwise, have a lovely Friday afternoon and weekend, everybody, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks for our last webinar in this series, which is with Katie Leeson, who is the MD of Social Chain. So should be great fun to finish up on. Take care. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.